Hi everyone, it's time to learn about the trait perspective on personality. This is the third out of our 4 perspectives that we're going to be talking about. So the trait perspective starts in ancient Greece. It's talking about aspects of our personality that are relatively consistent, meaning you can identify them and they are true in most humans. So the ancient Greeks based traits on bodily fluids. So we do know that they had some medical understanding of the human body and different fluids that existed. They called humors. And they argued that those controlled 4 human traits. Sanguine, which is cheerful, that was from blood. Melancholic, which was depressed, that was from yellow bile. Choleric, which is being irritable, cranky, that's from black bile. And phlegmatic, which is being unemotional, not responding to emotional situations, and that was from phlegm. The name's right in it. And they believed that when you had personality issues, that was a result of an unbalanced humors. So you often saw treatment involving draining fluid from different areas. It could be bloodletting, where they drained your blood, or it could be draining it directly from the brain, where they would involve either drilling holes or cutting out a piece of your skull to allow some of the liquid to escape. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to die, in case anyone's thinking that's what would happen. But it can cause brain damage, in which case it would say it was just unable to be treated. But we do have many skeletons that have shown fused skull fractures for people that clearly lived on beyond that point. So the trait perspective has been around for a very long time, obviously, if it's developed in ancient Greece. When it's picked up by psychology, you'll see that the traits are expanded. On the next slide, you see Gordon Allport's trait theory. And he is going to be the one to say that it's obviously more than 4. He's going to create quite a lot. So to start with, he argues that personality should only be studied in normal adults, similar to the humanistic perspective, where you can only see how it works correctly if you're looking at it working correctly. Studying just the disorders or the abnormal does not tell you about the normal. He is going to argue that current experiences have a greater effect on an adult than childhood experiences, so that is different than the psychodynamic perspective. And you'll see him argue all individual personalities are unique, and then he'll start identifying traits. He's going to go a little crazy with it, because by the time he finishes, he says that there are 18,000 different traits, which there's just no way to quantify any type of data in that on a large scale. Okay. So starting with his 18,000 traits, you'll start to see other psychologists come in and say he's got good points, that there's more than just the Greek 4, but they could all be narrowed down to broader categories, and that's where Raymond Cattell will come in, and he'll use factor analysis. The idea that some of your traits can predict other traits. So if you, for example, if you're not really outgoing, you might also not take risks, and that can all fall under the category of being like reserved versus very outgoing. He's going to narrow down the field to 16 descriptive traits using factor analysis. This is just a method in statistics, for anyone who's taken the class, that lowers the probable number of effective factors. That's all I'm going to give you. If you want to learn more, feel free to ask Lombo, but that's all I'm giving you for today. So that becomes generally accepted. You'll see some other versions of it. For example, on the next slide, you have Hans Einzig's biological dimensions. So he also is using statistical analysis, and he's going to try and narrow down even more than the 16 that's proposed by Cattell. What's interesting is when he does the factor analysis, and then organizes them into basically 4 categories. Those 4 categories wind up being the same ones the ancient Greeks had. You had irritable, cheerful, unemotional, and depressed. Okay, ranging from stable to unstable and from extroverted to introverted. I'm sure you've heard those words before. There's a lot of memes going around right now because you need to go check on your extrovert friends because they cannot handle being quarantined. And then introverts have been training for this their entire life. So extroverts are outgoing and sociable. Introverts are quiet and they keep to themselves. And that's one line of categorizing people. The other line is emotional stability versus instability. If you are stable, you're relaxed, you're calm. If you're unstable, that's where you're very anxious or you worry. And you fall somewhere within that range. Okay. What will come down to from Isaacs is to make a big argument that even though he comes up with 4 categories, there's really, if you look overall, 5 big ones. It's called the Big 5 Traits, which is on our next slide. And you'll see it is organized using the word canoe. If you need a word to remember, just mnemonic device. So you have consciousness, sorry, not consciousness necessarily, conscientiousness, which is being organized. If you're conscientious of what's going on, you're organized. Agreeableness is just being nice. Neuroticism is what your level of chill is. If you've heard of being neurotic, means very anxious and worried. Openness doesn't necessarily mean being open to everything and letting it all in, but it also means being creative, willing to think outside the box. And then the last one is extroversion, to talk about your social level. That would be where you're extroverted or introverted. Okay. Now, these traits are what were designed to create real personality tests or personality inventories. And this is when it's based on scientific collected data, not BuzzFeed. You respond to items within a range, like you strongly agree, you strongly disagree, and then what's in between. And the questions are all true or false or multiple choice. And it's designed to give greater validity to the test. And they're more reliable because with that range, you can collect a lot of information quickly, but it can also, it's not swayed by anyone who's giving the test. It is simply you taking the test. Okay. Most emotional disorders are actually identified using a similar personality test. It's called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, or MMPI. And it's designed the same way where you rank yourself. There are issues where people will rank themselves higher or lower based on what they think they should have. And that can be used. If you, I have a small picture on this slide, but if you go to the next slide, you can see many disorders that we'll be talking about in our next unit, ranging from hypochondriasis, which is hypochondria, where you think you're sick all the time, all the way down to social introversion in terms of being excessively shy and inhibited. Okay. So all of these disorders that are identified by the MMPI, it's also important to note that they are treated through both therapy and medication. But you need to have that diagnosis in order to get that therapy and medication. Okay. So if we're going to evaluate this trait theory, how do we feel about it? There's some big issues that come up with the trait theory. Number one, it doesn't consider how important the situation is to a particular trait. You might be very outgoing in one instance and not outgoing in another. It doesn't explain why we behave the way we do, which is why I have that lovely clip from The Office. It's just, this is how you behave. There's no reasoning behind it. And then the last one, it doesn't consider the effect of our thoughts on our behavior because it's just measuring what you do. It doesn't take into account what you might have thought of leading up to it in order to create that decision. Okay? It all comes down to your thoughts can affect behavior because it's not just about how you think about a situation. It can also be how you perceive a situation. What do you think is happening or has happened, and how do you react to that? And you know that some people can see a situation one way and someone else can see it a different way, and you'll have different reactions because of that. All right, so that is trait theory. I'm actually giving you a personality test based on the Big Five, the Canoe. It looks long, and you're going to be like, I don't want to do it. I swear, it's going to take you like 5 minutes. You just got to, you read it through, and you rank each situation, saying that you are a 1 and you disagree with that, or you're a 5 and you very strongly agree with it. And it's all statements like, I am the life of the party. Okay. And this is the model for a real personality test. This is what it would be, and it's a lot of questions because that's where you get that extra data. But they all match up. You'll see at the end they match up to the 5 big traits. Okay, so you'll do it. You add in a little extra. You'll have to do a little math at the end to see where you rank. But then right after it, you'll see what your number means. So you'll get to see how you rank on them as they do. So it's not really a thinking type of one. You don't have to explain anything. You're just going to rank and then do some quick math, and you don't even have to respond. It's just a little bit to know more about yourself. All right, so that's the end, and I will see you next class.